Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier, and thank you for stopping by. If you didn't get a chance to look at the Al Jazeera inside story about Ebola, do have a look at it. I thank Laura Kyle for that. I made a number of projections which were at odds with the WHO. I basically was saying that I think it's undercounted. I think it's got serious non-linear exponential characteristics, and therefore I said, like WHO was putting out a figure of 20,000, I said, given the maths of the situation, that would be 200,000. Home thoughts, I like this tweet from Gotham 3, one of the main sculptures at the Burning Man finale. It really is a fabulous photograph. That took me to Carl Sagan, who said, "Our planet is a lonely speck in the great enveloping cosmic dark. In all this vastness there is no hint that help will come from elsewhere. To save us from ourselves, it is up to us." And then I like this tweet about, it was a map of every device in the world connected to the internet, and pretty remarkable as well. Takes me back to a book I'm reading, which is Don DeLillo's End Zone. I became fascinated with Don DeLillo some time ago, and then I got all his books and I've been reading through them. In this book, it's called End Zone, and it's a story about football players. And it's extremely clever and very subversive. He uses something like football to describe the world that I described as arrhythmic. But let me take this paragraph from it. "There's a kind of theology at work here. The bombs are a kind of God. As his power grows, our fear naturally increases. I get as apprehensive as anyone else, maybe more so. We have too many bombs. They have too many bombs. There's a kind of theology of fear that comes out of this. We begin to capitulate to the overwhelming presence. It's so powerful. It dwarfs us so much. We say, let the God have his way. He's so much more powerful than we are. Let it happen, whatever he ordains. It used to be that the gods punished men by using the forces of nature against them, or by arousing them to take up their weapons and destroy each other. Now God is the force of nature itself, the fusion of tritium and deuterium. Now he's the weapon. So maybe this time we went too far in creating a being of omnipotent power. All this hardware, fantastic stockpiles of hardware. The big danger is that we'll surrender to the sense of inevitability and start flinging mud all over the planet." And that takes me to political reflections, and I wrote on the 25th of August that in my view the new normal is a very arrhythmic world. When I plugged arrhythmia into my computer, it threw up this. For years he'd been studying the phenomenon of chaos, of which an arrhythmic heartbeat was a perfect example. And then Don DeLillo again, "We are not witnessing the flow of information so much as pure spectacle, or information made sacred, ritually unreadable. The small monitors of the office, home and car become a kind of idolatry here, where crowds might gather in astonishment." President Petro Poroshenko has said a number of things over the last 24 hours, one of which was direct and open aggression has been launched against Ukraine from a neighboring state. This has changed the situation in the zone of conflict in a radical way, he said. And then trumping him, the Ukrainian defense chief Valery Helete claimed that the operation to free East Ukraine from terrorists is over, and announced the beginning of the great patriotic war that would leave dozens of thousands dead. Made the statement on his Facebook page, "A great war has arrived at our doorstep, the likes of which Europe has not seen since World War II. Unfortunately, the losses in such a war will be measured not in the hundreds but thousands and tens of thousands, he said. And I take you back to that point I made, that NATO has thrown out a whole new characterization of warfare called ambiguous warfare, and that eastern Ukraine has become a shadow zone. Then an interesting story on Bloomberg View. Army General Valery Gerasimov has headed the General Staff since 2012, delivered a speech to a general meeting of the Academy of Military Sciences. In the 21st century, there is a tendency to erase the differences between the states of war and peace, he said. Wars are no longer declared, and once they start, they do not follow the customary mold. Then he elaborated. The emphasis in the confrontation methods employed is shifting toward the broad use of political, economic, information, humanitarian and other non-military measures, taken along with the use of the population's protest potential. All that is supplemented with covert military measures such as information warfare activities and the actions of special operations forces. The open use of force, often under the guise of peacekeeping and crisis resolution, only occurs at a certain stage, mainly to achieve ultimate success in a conflict. Asymmetrical actions which allow a side to level out the adversary's fighting advantage are becoming widespread, and I love that word, and it is, I think, an important nomenclatura for this age, asymmetry. They include the use of special operations personnel and internal opposition to create a permanently open front throughout the territory of the adversary state, as well as influence through information whose forms and methods are continuously perfected. Put up a photograph of the Ukrainian Defense Minister Valery Helete. And as I said, it is a shadow zone, and I'll put up an image of one. NATO is responding by saying it's set to form a 4,000-strong spearhead force designed to go into action in 48 hours in response to Russian intervention in Ukraine. Putin, in fact, quoted the speech of NATO General Secretary Manfred Werner in Brussels on 17th May 1990. The fact that we are ready not to place a NATO army outside of German territory gives the Soviet Union a firm security guarantee, and obviously the point Putin's making is that that guarantee no longer exists. And then I saw, just before I went to do this podcast, it flash across my screen that Putin tells Barroso he could be in Kiev in 48 hours. Al-Qaeda's new front, Jihadi rap. This is a very interesting piece in Politico. London Stani is the author. And if you don't mind, I'm going to go through it in depth. Abdelmajid Abdelbari, the rapper suspected of murdering American journalist James Foley somewhere between Syria and Iraq, is the product of a British youth culture that has managed to merge two seemingly contradictory lifestyles, gangster rap and jihad. Like Douglas MacArthur McCain, an American hip-hop fan who was recently killed fighting for the Islamic State, Abdelbari represents a new and very scary evolution in modern jihadi history. Chuck Hagel recently described the Islamic State as a threat beyond anything we've ever seen. Yet we're only just beginning to grasp what is different about this group. One reason is that it includes men in its ranks whom you might expect to see in a nightclub, rather than fighting in the desert for an organization that would traditionally whip you for listening to music. As a result of this cultural elasticity, the Islamic State has succeeded in attracting supporters outside its natural recruiting pool. Both McCain and another Westerner, Denis Mamadou Kuspet, a German citizen who died fighting with the Islamic State and had a previous life as rapper D-So Dog with 3 albums to his name, became converts as part of this broader appeal. I first began to look into this hybrid phenomenon in 2008 when I was a journalist researching a subculture that had fused the extremism and violence of gangster rap were that of Al-Qaeda, or at least a version of it. During a month-long investigation for British television station Channel 4, I met dozens of young men across London who tended to have three things in common: a history of criminal activity, an ambition to be a gangster rapper, and a fixation with the terrorist group begun by Osama bin Laden. Their worldview was a mashup of what they called thug life, gleaned from the music of their US gangster rap heroes, along with selective borrowings from classic left-wing and race-based conspiracy theories. It promoted a do-anything approach to accumulating money and getting ahead with a focus on violence and intimidation. The title of rapper 50 Cent's debut album, Get Rich or Die Trying, was regarded as an article of faith. They already saw themselves as soldiers in an endless urban conflict. Now they could become warriors in an epic global struggle. Bin Laden would have struggled to recognize their views as Islamic, even accordingly to his own warped definition. But the twisted genius of his ideological creation was that they did not need his approval to sign up. On the face of it, it's difficult to imagine two lifestyles more diametrically opposed than rap and Islamism. On one side is the bling culture of ostentatious consumption, alcohol, drugs, and easy sex. On the other is an austere and unforgiving worldview that seeks to recreate 7th century Arabia. What is frightening is that the Islamic State has been able to bridge these two very different worlds because of the ideology it inherited from Al-Qaeda, which it uses to attract young men motivated by a vague sense of injustice and anger at the West. In many ways, the world of hip-hop runs parallel to and mirrors the place of Islam in many urban communities in the Western world. Hip-hop provides a cultural frame of reference that allows followers to share social experiences they feel are not appreciated by wider society, whether that is poverty, racism, discrimination, or dysfunction within their own community. Gangster rap and Islamist extremism are both a dark reflection of their respective mainstream expressions. A sense of grievance towards wider society, focus on vengeance and fetishize violence as a way of redressing the balance. That's it, isn't it? It's a sort of fetishistic approach to violence. Take their audiences on similar journeys. Followers and listeners are made to feel they're at the center of an unfolding, dangerous epic that will require guts and determination to survive. Gangster rap might celebrate violence. The ideology of Al-Qaeda provides the intellectual justification to undertake those actions. Abdel Barry, or El Jinni, and Lyricist Jinn, as he called himself in his YouTube videos, is part of a subsection of British youth culture in which Islamist extremism and gangster rap do not just run in parallel, but fuse together. In my 2008 investigation, I met several other young men like him, who also lived in West London. Some had family connections to Algeria, others Morocco, Iraq, the Gulf. Without exception, all their families had Islamist political leanings. Abdel Barry's father was extradited by British authorities to stand trial in the US for Al-Qaeda's 1998 bombings in Tanzania and Kenya, would be the most extreme. Others had family members who were members of non-violent political groups, while some had fathers who fought the Soviets in Afghanistan in the 80s. Abdel Barry's lyrics echo 50 Cent and Tupac Shakur's progression from victimhood and violence to redemption. I'm trying to change my ways, but there's blood on my hands, and I can't change my ways until there's funds in the bank, he raps in a track from 2012. In later videos, he refers to his anger at his father's treatment. I swear the day they come and took my dad, I could have killed a cop or two. It was the ideology and the opportunity created by IS in Iraq and Syria that provided him with an outlet for the grievances that he faced in London. Abdel Barry came from a family that was already somewhat familiar with the idea of violence for Islamist causes. McCain and Cuthbert, however, did not. All three found in the ideology of Al-Qaeda a path offering the vengeance and redemption that they were looking for. and the latest and most arguably violent incarnation of Al-Qaeda, the Islamic State, provided the opportunity. IS's ability to attract these people to its cause means that the ideological wheels set in motion by bin Laden are reaching new audiences and converting sympathy into participation, a dangerous development in the world of Islamist extremism. Interesting essay, and in fact coalesced a lot of my thoughts, which have sort of come together. And these folks are speaking and messaging in the language of hip-hop, and that is allowing them to fall under the radar, I think, of a lot of intelligence sort of surveillance systems. And, I did write there was a spookiness about the British accent of hip-hop artist Abdel Majed Abdel Barry El Jinni, lyricist Jinn, Jihadi John. And in that piece I said IS and the likes of Al-Shabaab have proven accomplished and frightening and frightful exponents of the 21st century digital ecosystem. And what is so fascinating, I wrote then, is that their media efforts all point west. Admittedly, to this group of people, mostly immigrants, have gone to the west and have not found a toehold or a foothold. I'll put up a screen capture of Abdel Majed Abdel Barry El Jinni, lyricist Jinn, Jihadi John, and from there jump you to the fact that he's playing on the word jinn, which is a very powerful word in Islamic theology. The Quran says the jinn are made of a smokeless and scorching fire, also physical in nature, being able to interfere physically with people and objects and likewise be acted upon. They are usually invisible to humans, but humans do appear clearly to jinn, as they can possess them. Jinn have the power to travel large distances at extreme speeds, and are thought to live in remote areas, mountains, seas, trees, and the air in their own communities. Like humans, jinn will also be judged on the Day of Judgment. Put up another photograph of him, which I found from the Times of Israel, interestingly enough. And that jumps me to my reflections after Westgate, when I wrote that piece immediately after reflections on Westgate, Samantha Luthwaite, and the White Widow. And I sort of spoke about the tweet, 14-hour standoff relayed in 1,400 rounds of bullets and 140 characters of vengeance and still ongoing. Good morning, Kenya. And my linguistic analysis told me that no one in Mogadishu would write such a thing. And then another one read, here are two of the Mujahideen inside Westgate Mall, unruffled and strolling around the mall in such sang-froid manner. Sang-froid is a word, it would not be known in Mogadishu, I can guarantee you that. I kept thinking to myself, sang-froid is such an unusual word. It means coolness of mind, calmness, composure, a kind of cold-bloodedness under pressure. I kept thinking to myself that sang-froid is a quality highly prized in the military. That's a word the daughter of a military man might know. Nisha tells me I think it's a woman when we scanned all the tweets in real time. And I said, that's exactly it. Another tweet says, I am titanium. Again, a reference to music, contemporary music, referencing a David Guetta song. And the lyrics read like this, you shouted out, but I can't hear a word you say. I'm talking loud, not saying much. I'm criticized, but all your bullets ricochet. You shoot me down, but I get up. I'm bulletproof, nothing to lose. Fire away, ricochet, you take your aim. Fire away, you shoot me down, but I won't fall. I am titanium. You shoot me down, but I won't fall. I am titanium. Cut me down. But it's you who will have further to fall. Ghost town and haunted love. Raise your voice, sticks and stones may break my bones. I'm talking loud, not saying much. And essentially what I was saying was I put Samantha Luthwaite, the daughter of a military officer, at that scene, whether she was in or just out, but lots of other intelligence showed me that I heard about, tells me that she was just outside in a van. I'll put up a photograph of Westgate. On Monday, more than 200 supporters of Qadri seized the PTV building, reportedly seizing weapons from security guards. This is in Pakistan. Imran Khan said he would not call off the protests. I call upon my workers to remain peaceful, Khan said from atop a shipping container at the main rally site. Do not carry out any acts of violence. God has given us victory. I'll put up a photograph of him bowling. He was Raj and Mala's friend. They were my neighbours in Putney for a long time, and I met him many times in Putney over a weekend in Point of Fairness. Narendra Modi with Shinzo Abe in Tokyo apparently could walk away with a lot of money from Japan for infrastructure. Good looking photo, I thought. Euro 131.18, it's been on the slide. Dollar index 82.90. Japanese yen 104.78, that slipped. Swissy 0.9204. Pound 165.82. Aussie back below 93 at 0.9295. As Stevens, the central bank governor, said, the Australian dollar remains above most estimates of its fundamental value, particularly given the declines in key commodity prices. Indian rupee 60.61, South Korean won 1016.93, the Rial 224.61, Egyptian pound back at that level of 715, South African rand a little bit softer, 1071.19. Dollar index, I'll put up a 3-month chart of that. I'm very bullish about the dollar, and as I wrote over the weekend, or 25th of August, I said, you see, in the old days, these conditions, massive geopolitical uncertainty and so forth, would have created a flight into the dollar. And interestingly, the dollar has been punching higher. If things tip big, the dollar might soar. I said euro dollar 131.18 looks as if it's going lower. Yves Carcel, who built the luxury brand Louis Vuitton, dies at the age of 66. I'll put up a photograph of him posing for a photograph during the opening of the new Etoile store operated by LVMH Moet Hennessy in a former cinema in Rome in 2012. Gold 1280.98. I'm looking for it to fall away to 1240, notwithstanding the geopolitical pressure. I think the dollar, a stronger dollar, is going to carry everything before it. Crude oil at $95.79. I'll put up a 1-month chart. We've had a little bit of a bounce, but I think it's still oversold. Coming to sub-Saharan Africa, the Libyan capital is under militia control as chaos deepens. The outgoing government admitted Monday from its safe refuge in the east of the country that it has in effect lost control of Tripoli to armed militias. Let me take you back to the 24th of October 2011 when I wrote Gaddafi's body in a freezer, what's the message? I'm left thinking this dead Gaddafi business is one powerful message. And today Marshall McLuhan's prediction in the Gutenberg Galaxy, 1962, that the new electronic interdependence recreates the world in the image of a global village has come to pass. The image of a bloody Gaddafi, then of a dead Gaddafi in a meat locker, have flashed around the world via the mobile, YouTube and Twitter. I asked then, who's in charge of the messaging? Through the fog of real-time and raw footage, I note a very powerful message. The essence of that message being, don't F-U-C-K with me, or with us, because you will end up dead and a trophy souvenir in a fridge. And my conclusions today are, there was evidently no plan beyond that. I put up a photograph of Gaddafi dead and someone taking a photograph of him dead to make the point that I was referring to about flashing around the world. US military forces carried out an operation on Monday against Al-Shabaab militants in Somalia, US Department of Defense spokesman said, we are assessing the results of the operation and will provide additional information as and when appropriate, Pentagon spokesman Rear Admiral John Kirby said in a statement. Journalists in Somalia reported that suspected US drones fired missiles near the port city of Barawe, the stronghold for Al-Shabaab. Nearly 1 year ago, on October 5, Navy SEALs raided a seaside house in Barawe in an attempt to capture Abdul Qadir Muhammad Abdul Qadir, a Kenyan native and senior Al-Shabaab commander. That raid sparked a gunfight, but was unsuccessful. US officials said the SEALs withdrew because the risk of harming bystanders had become too great. Peter Gress reported that they were actually repelled. And that was, I think, before he went inside. The US government's Voice of America News Service, which broadcasts programs to Somalia, reported that a target of the attack may have been the alleged mastermind of Al-Shabaab's attack on an upscale shopping mall in Nairobi, Kenya, in September 2013. That individual, Mukhtar Abu Zubair, also known as Godane, has emerged in recent years as the primary leader of Al-Shabaab. I'll put up a photograph of Ahmed Abdi Godane. Went back to the 20th of Jan when I wrote, I predict African equity markets will make it a 3-year bull phenomenon, and I think they will, one or two exceptions. South African all shares up 10.5% this year. It bounced 0.3% yesterday. It's back above the 51,000 level. Record highs are at 52,000. The rand has softened to 1071.26. I'll put up a 6-month chart of that. The Egyptian pound has improved again, last at 715.03. The Egyptian stock market is at multi-year highs. It's up 39.368% this year. Nigerian all share edged 0.32% lower, but it's just eked out a 0.1669% gain so far this year. The Ghana Stock Exchange is at 7-month lows, but it's up 2.5714%. The EIU Economic Intelligence Unit put out an interesting twit pic of African economies, how they've struggled to develop manufacturing industries. Do have a look at that. Uganda says no to sovereign bonds in an interesting comment. Emmanuel Mutabile, governor of the central bank, told the East African newspaper that African countries should not be complacent about the dangers of big projects built on sovereign debt, adding that African countries would never again get debt relief. He's very right. 3 cases, new suspected cases of Ebola in Port Harcourt. That's the heart of the oil and gas industry in Nigeria. This is the point I made to Laura, that, Guinea, Sierra Leone, Liberia, small little guppies in the pond. Nigeria, the big elephant in the room. That gets an infection, changes everything. Independent is saying that the Ebola virus is about to rip through towns. This is the deadliest ever outbreak of the virus, is heading for Africa's teeming cities. This photograph from Lightbox caught my attention. Daniel Berahulak. Quarantine creates a new reality as Ebola grips Liberia's capital. Have a look at that inside story if you haven't had a chance. And I revert to my point that viruses exhibit non-linear and exponential characteristics. And then an interesting report on Agence France Presse about the denial around Ebola. When people say Ebola does not exist, they are rebelling against something. KPMG refused to approve Banco Espirito Santo's accounts in a pretty hard-hitting response. And then I like this photograph of flowers in the Kirstenbosch Botanic Gardens below Table Mountain. Kenya, the inflation rate rose to 8.36% in the year to August from 7.67% in the previous month. Annual food inflation accelerated 10.9% in August, compared with 9.1% in July. I, however, think this is the apogee in the rate in 2014, and therefore, on balance, I don't expect any change, but the pressure is building on the central bank. The Kenya shilling is at 88.55, just below 31-month lows hit last week of 88.90. I, for one, am not yet prepared to buy the 90-plus shilling per dollar and even 95 forecast. The Nairobi All Share closed at a record high for the 6th consecutive session. It's up 16.443% this year. The NAC 20 crossed 5,100 on Friday last week. It's up 4.344% this year at a more than 60-month highs. I wrote about this and I called it the greatest bull markets climb a wall of worry, and I was talking about essentially the fact that we are in a bull market that began in 2012, and all shares up 110.83% over 3 years and 28.55% since Westgate. Just have that in your mind. Bit of a spat developed over some coal tendering over 174 billion coal plant in Lamu. Mr. Karubi said if you're a Chinese firm, you can go and live in Shanghai, apparently. And 284 days ago, I had a rather nice time with Mr. Karubi and Mr. Ireland at a Johnny Walker evening. I'll put up a photograph and you can see both of them in it. The Nairobi All Share rallied 0.747%, set a record closing high, 6th consecutive session, real red-hot streak, any which way you care to cut it. NAC 20, as I said, is a higher than 60-month high. Inflation obviously is an issue that might get some people thinking. I think the central bank should hold off because you've got that 10% fall coming in crude oil, which will sharply taper that inflation rate. Safaricom surged 1.54% to close at a record of 13.15. It had previously hit this record in April. Longhorn Kenya traded 1.82% of its shares. That's up 11.11% in 2014. Equity Bank rallied 2.67% to close at 48, and is within a whisker and less than 1% of a record closing high set in July. KCB firm 0.87%. It's up 22.75% this year and is less than 1% below a record high reached on the 5th of last month. TransCentury was very active, traded 2.304% of its shares. Centum corrected 4.63% off an all-time high yesterday, but it's in a bull trend. It was overdue profit taking. BAT rallied 2.405% to close at a record, and if you include dividends, that's returned 40.416% year to date. Once again, thanks for stopping by. I am grateful.